You are staring at a piece of equipment that is lying to you. We have been conditioned to believe that if a pan lacks a boutique logo or a $300 price tag, it belongs in the scrap heap. Yet, if you walk into a Walmart, you will see a basic $12 skillet sitting on the bottom shelf. If you compare it to the high-end iron trending on your feed, you will realize the metallurgical DNA is nearly identical. You're not paying for better heat retention or improved performance. You're paying for a brand story. While creators push luxury wares to their followers, the gold mines are collecting dust in the discount aisle, completely ignored by everyone caught up in the marketing hype. When you walk into a kitchen supply store, your brain goes straight to the familiar black handle of a Lodge skillet. It is the benchmark for American cast iron. For generations, this brand has established the quality baseline for the average home cook, and in doing so, it has performed a quiet act of psychological architecture. Lodge's ubiquity has set a perceptual floor that reshapes how your brain evaluates everything beneath it. This is price anchoring in action. Once Lodge occupies the role of the credible minimum, your mind performs an automatic calculation every time you encounter something cheaper. A lower price stops reading as a neutral data point and becomes a warning signal. You assume the pan sitting beneath the Lodge threshold must be thin, brittle, or under-engineered. The cognitive shortcut is fast and largely unconscious. If the trusted benchmark costs this much, then anything significantly cheaper must be cutting corners somewhere that matters. What makes this effective is that Lodge earned its anchor position through genuine longevity and heritage. The anchor is not arbitrary, which is precisely why it is so difficult to dislodge. Your skepticism feels rational, almost like informed consumer caution rather than simple brand conditioning. But anchoring does not only tell you what to trust, it tells you what to discard without examination. An entire tier of cookware gets filtered out before you ever lift it off the shelf, not because your hands confirmed it was inferior, but because the price alone activated a Lodge-calibrated alarm. The question is whether that alarm is protecting you or simply protecting the anchor. The price tag on your skillet is a marketing construct, not a measure of thermal performance. You have been sold the idea that there is a tiered hierarchy where the metal behaves differently based on how much money left your account at the register. The reality is that cast iron is a commodity material. It is iron and carbon, melted and poured into a mold, cooling into a product that follows the basic laws of physics regardless of the brand logo stamped on the handle. When you see a premium brand charging 4 times the price of a generic alternative, you are not paying for better metallurgical properties. You're paying for a narrative. You are paying for the aesthetic of a polished handle, the promise of heritage, or perhaps a layer of decorative enamel that adds color but does nothing to change how the pan holds heat. This is the ultimate kitchen illusion. Marketing teams work overtime to conflate a high price tag with superior durability, but they rely on your ignorance of the manufacturing process to keep the margins high. They want you to believe that a cheaper pan will warp or crack under normal conditions, but every scientific analysis confirms that well-poured iron remains stable under heat. The enemy is this persistent narrative that insists you must pay a premium for a tool that the industry has been perfecting for centuries. Every time you reach for the most expensive option, you're paying for the story, even though the metal is essentially identical to the budget competitor sitting right next to it on the shelf. How do you stop paying for that story when the branding is designed to confuse you? You need a tool that works regardless of where the pan was made or what label hides on its bottom. Enter the finish test. Instead of looking at a logo, run your fingers across the cooking surface. You're feeling for grit and looking for casting quality. What you want is a surface that is predictably smooth, not one that feels like coarse sandpaper out of the box. Artisanal luxury pans are often machined or hand-sanded for a reason, but that same level of refinement is appearing on budget models like the Mainstay's 12-inch skillet from Walmart. Next, look at the seasoning. A consistent deep black layer should cover every square inch of the iron. If you spot flaking or grayish blotches, the factory has skipped the most crucial step of the manufacturing process. A $12 skillet that has been poured with precision and cleaned properly will outperform a $100 designer pan that relies on hype. When you prioritize the tactile consistency of the iron over the status of a brand, the price tag reveals itself as mere marketing overhead. The iron is the same. Once you start evaluating the metal itself, you will notice something surprising about the global landscape of where these pans are coming from. When you look at the labels on the back of these pans, the map of where your cookware originates looks very different from what the marketing suggests. You might assume that a lower price point naturally indicates a lower standard of manufacturing, but the reality is dictated by the specific foundry in question rather than a country's entire output. Take the Utopia Kitchen 12-inch pre-seasoned skillet. It is manufactured in China and retails for under $20, yet it exists in the same category as pans that cost 4 times that amount. The geography of the foundry is less important than the consistency of the casting process. In Colombia, brands like Victoria have cultivated a reputation for quality using different standards, proving that expertise is not confined to one region. The problem arises when we equate a brand name with a geographical pedigree that may not exist. We see companies like Old Mountain, which is also manufactured in China, marketed in ways that target consumers looking for a traditional or heritage aesthetic. The market relies on the fact that you will not look past the surface of the branding to see where the production actually takes place. This is not about one country being better than another. It is about transparency in the supply chain and your willingness to stop assuming the import sticker defines the thermal capability of the pan. This brings up an even more complex reality because some of the most premium-feeling brands are using a split-model approach that complicates everything you thought you knew about manufacturing. This brings us to the hybrid model, a strategy that confuses consumers who assume that where a product is conceived must be where it is built. Take a brand like Bare Bones as an example. Its identity is rooted in Utah, where creators develop the design aesthetics and performance specifications of the skillet. Yet the actual casting process happens in China. It is tempting to call this a contradiction, but the reality is move deliberate. This is not a case of a generic pan being pulled from a shared production line and stamped with a new logo. The design team in Utah authors the blueprint, determining how the iron should be poured and how the surface should be finished. The overseas foundry then executes those specifications at an industrial scale that a domestic small-batch operation could not match economically. The specification authorship remains with the brand. The foundry provides capacity, not creative direction. This matters because it distinguishes the hybrid model from simpler cosmetic rebranding. A brand that contributes original performance specifications to the manufacturing process is doing something categorically different from one that merely selects a finished unit from a catalog and applies its own packaging. The former involves design accountability. The latter involves only presentation. What hybrid brands offer the consumer is meticulous design intent without the overhead of domestic labor costs. Many of these products perform alongside gear priced significantly higher, precisely because the performance blueprint was written with intention rather than inherited from a generic mold. So if the specification is the product, does the foundry's address on a shipping container actually change what ends up in your kitchen? Inside a high-volume foundry supplying commodity cast iron to retailers, the economics reveal something the shelf display is designed to obscure. A molten batch of iron poured from the same crucibles is destined for destination brands at wildly different price tiers, and the foundry's interest ends at the shipping dock. What happens after that is entirely a branding decision, not a metallurgical one. This is the mechanism worth understanding: pure rebranding. A finished generic unit, one that arrived at the end of the production line with no brand-specific design input, no proprietary specification, and no authorship from the company whose logo it will eventually carry, can be polished, laser-etched with a premium name, and placed into a box at triple the unit cost. The foundry receives its contracted volume quota. The retailer receives a product that signals exclusivity. The consumer receives the same iron that shipped to a budget aisle across town. This is categorically different from the hybrid model, where a brand contributes original performance specifications before a single pour is made. Pure rebranding involves no specification authorship. The differentiation is cosmetic at the point of exit from the foundry, involving surface refinement, a logo, and a box. The foundry's economic incentive is indifferent to which outcome a given unit serves. It simply executes the surface standards contracted by whichever buyer placed the order. For the foundry, premium and budget are administrative categories applied after the iron has cooled. That sorting process, occurring at the branding stage rather than the metallurgical one, is where real margin is manufactured. And it raises an uncomfortable question. If the sorting is happening after the metal solidifies, who exactly is deciding which box you should be buying from? If geography is removed from the equation, we have to address the exceptions. While much of the market relies on the same commodity iron, some manufacturers are moving beyond standard pre-seasoning to chase genuine mechanical advantages. Look at what is happening in North Carolina with a company called Grizzly. They took a distinct technical pivot by producing nickel-coated cast iron products. This is not just clever marketing or a fancy logo. Nickel plating serves a distinct mechanical purpose, providing a much harder, more corrosion-resistant surface than standard oil-based seasoning. It changes the way the metal interacts with heat and acidity during a long braise or a light sear. When you see a price jump on a piece like that, you're no longer just paying for a story or a heritage myth. You are paying for a secondary industrial process that alters the performance of the iron at a molecular level. This is the difference between a brand that simply rebrands a generic pan and one that engineers a superior tool. The lesson is simple. If you're going to venture outside the standard entry-level price bracket, ensure you're buying a legitimate technical feature rather than a decorative finish. Look for the plating and the specific metallurgical change. The iron is the same, but the functional edge justifies the cost. That realization makes you a cook who sees past the lifestyle marketing and buys on objective merit. You are now the person in the room who can spot a $12 skillet that outperforms a luxury showpiece because you know where the value actually lives. Stop hunting for the prestigious label and start prioritizing the metallurgical reality. If the iron itself is truly a commodity, how did branding become such an effective way to inflate our bills?